Welcome back to Chel Chit Chat, everyone. Oh my gosh, we are in for a fun one today. For this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by Janice Labossiere, and she is the in-house live production video director for True North Sports and Entertainment. So that means when you go to Winnipeg Jets or Manitoba Moose games at the Canada Life Centre here in Winnipeg, Janice is responsible for the video side of game production, so choosing which cameras are going up on the jumbotrons at which time, which plays warrant replays, celebrity lookalike cameras, who is going up on the screen for that. Just all this really cool stuff that people don't always notice or think about, but really enhances the in-arena experience for hockey fans. There are only 2 women across the entire league that have a role like Janice. It's a very intense job. It requires a ton of tactical knowledge of the sport, and it requires you to be laser focused throughout the entire game. But this episode was so cool because if you're just genuinely interested in hockey the way I am and the way everyone who listens to this podcast is, you're just going to be clinging to every single word she says because it's so fascinating to hear really how things work behind the scenes and get a good look under the hood of how the game that we love so much comes to life. I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode. It's a totally different look at the game, and I learned so much recording it, so I hope that you get to learn just as much as I did while you listen to it. Without further ado, let's get back into it. As always, I'm Lyss Houde. I'm going to host this conversation, and I'm so excited for you to hear the Chel Chit Chat episode with Janice Labossiere. Welcome back to Chel Chit Chat, everybody. I am so excited to be joined by Janice today. This is going to be such a fun conversation. I feel like there have been a lot of different people we've had on the show that come from similar backgrounds, have, similar roles, different things like that, and they all bring such unique perspectives and stuff, but I feel like this is a really, really different lane that we're kind of going down today and really, really going behind the scenes, and that's a metaphorical way to describe what you do, but also an extremely tactical way to describe it as well, so I'm super excited. Janice, how are you doing? I'm so excited that you're here. Tell everyone a little bit about who you are before we get chatting.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this all week, all month, since we planned this. About me, I love sports. Even though I wasn't blessed with like coordination, speed, good motor skills, any of that good stuff, I love storylines, the beauty, the artistry, and then also those stories that just kind of weave its way through sport at all levels. So as an example, yes, I do work, for an NHL team, and I've worked all kinds, Grey Cup, all kinds of things that are at a high level. But at the same time, I'm going to be heading out to my little cousin's provincials this weekend because there's something that is so exciting about being involved at sport, no matter the level. So yes, sport is super important to me. My winter does revolve around the NHL and AHL seasons. The second that those schedules come out, I know that my next 9 months or 10 months are set. So that's one side of it. Personally, I'm a traveler at heart. I have been really fortunate to have many opportunities to travel through work, through just life. But no matter what, I am a Manitoban at heart too. So I'm always coming home. I've lived here my entire life. And I've thankfully worked for the Bombers. I've worked for the Jets. I've worked for the Moose. I've worked for the Bisons. I've had an opportunity to rep my hometown teams throughout my career. And I love that side of things. But yes, as you said, overall, I am a behind the scenes person. I get stuff done. I love being part of a team, but I'm not usually front and center. I'm not usually in front of the cameras. So I really appreciate this invite because you've had some really great guests along the way. And I want to live up to those powerhouses as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, well, we're already getting off on a great track because if you're so proud to be Manitoban, that's just like the baseline part of this season that I love so much, that our Manitobans are so excited to be from here, so proud to be from here, and it's awesome that, I think anyone who's a sports fan who has strong Manitoba roots has a very soft spot for all of those teams that you just mentioned, so it's very cool that you've had such a unique opportunity to get to know them all in such an interesting way. So I want you to tell everyone a little bit before we dive into the real specifics of kind of what your role is with the Jets and the Moose and that sort of thing, what your background is and what you kind of do professionally and what your skill set is kind of from a professional standpoint, to kind of get to know who you are, what sorts of things you're good at, and what your career has done for you and where it's taken you.
So my day job right now, I work at the University of Manitoba, where I lead a team of 14 incredible audiovisual and photography pros. It's a super strong team. And what we do is we support events, audio, and video productions for the entire University of Manitoba community. So I'm very fortunate that I work with a wide variety of people around the university. I've been there for about 17 years, having, a background in communications, web, video production, project management. This role kind of pulls that all together. So I've been really fortunate. The university is a great place to learn all of those skills and be able to stack a lot of them as a career project, like progression along the way. Before the U of M, I worked for a very cool Winnipeg company called Road Trips. They do sports travel. So supplying tickets and hotel packaging, along with all kinds of experience stuff to the biggest sporting events in the world. So I worked in marketing. We called it smarketing because you had to be smart about it. It was a little cheeky. But also as part of that role, I got to do some tour hosting. So I hosted folks at the Kentucky Derby, the Ryder Cup, baseball tours. Super cool company. I still follow them closely, and they're close to my heart. But my background is really traditional. I'm a CreComm grad with a journalism diploma or journalism focus. I worked at MTS doing really corporate stuff while I finished my degree. So I worked in advertising, event planning, really corporate background to start. So pretty traditional, but I've been able to pivot as kind of media and communications marketing have changed. Starting in web, moving into video and social, adding on project management, adding on more managerial stuff. I've been able to do that in roles and for organizations that allowed me that flexibility while on the side having my side hustle, which is working in game production. So for over 20 years now, I've been able to do game production stuff for the likes of the Bombers, the Jets, the Moose. I worked for the Bombers. That was really my first start working with a traditional crew. I was there for 17 seasons. When I retired, they finally won a Grey Cup. So it was me. I was the curse. I saw some very
Noted.
terrible
Noted.
football in both years.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yes. So, and I'm coming up on my 20th year with True North now, where I started as a camera operator, moved into replay, really, really love the control room culture. And now I direct the in-house show for the Jets. And then I also help out on the Moose side for training and to provide a different look. That's a really good training crew. But yeah, so having that full-time job, that stability, and the side hustle that gave me, the flexibility to do both, it's been a really good way to stack my skills between the two.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's this is not the first episode where we've kind of touched on this whole concept of game production hockey, because this is something that everyone is subjected to, the fact that I am just so fascinated by game production. Okay, like I literally, when I got to learn from the Manitoba Moose what that actually looks like, I was blown away, because I think that I'm like a crazy scatterbrained kind of like having a lot of things going on at once, until I walk into a game production booth and I'm like, oh my gosh, like these are like the best multitaskers I've ever seen in my entire life. And so it's such a cool part of the game that everyone experiences, but not a lot of people understand kind of how it works under the hood. So tell everyone a little bit about what your job looks like at a Jets or a Moose game, and kind of what your role is on the game production team.
So I do video direction. So if you think of game presentation, there are all of these different groups. There is a promo team that is wrangling mascots and making sure that, things are being given out at certain times. There's the audio side of things where we have DJs and hosts, and they're out and they're doing their thing. We have broadcast engineers who are making sure everything looks and sounds great. And then there's the video side of things. So I am the in-game video director. So it's a part-time role. I come in and make sure that basically everything that goes up on the center hung, we don't call it a jumbotron because usually that's a Panasonic or a Sony, like there's a brand
It's kind of like
situation with that.
Kleenex, how it's like it's actually a facial tissue
Exactly.
kind of thing. Okay,
Exactly.
got it.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
use the term center hung, which I think is kind
Okay.
of funny. People automatically think it sounds strange. Big screen, center hung, either way. So there's this incredible mix of talent on a technical side, and then you have talent. So you have your hosts, and then at the in the office there is a game producer. So there's Kyle, who's our game producer, or Colin on the Moose side, and they are working with corporate and partnerships, and they're pulling together a script that we go out and execute. So on a day-to-day basis, like I want to say on the video side, there's probably about 20 of us between camera operators, replay operators, video playback, graphics, my technical director, who's the guy who actually presses the buttons. He's the one with the giant input. And myself, who we're all on headset listening to that producer who is giving us the timing of things. but we are executing everything that goes up on the screen. So my role in all of that, I direct traffic. I make sure everybody knows what they need to know, when they need to know it, and then I call those things. So I talk for a 7 o'clock game, I'll start talking around 4:30 and until after 3 stars. I am making sure everybody knows what they need to know to get things up on the screen when they need to go. So I'm
Wow, that's
editing live on the go.
wow, talking for like 8 hours. Maybe I chose the wrong career path. I feel like that sounds like something that I would love to do. No, that's so interesting. I think that you know sometimes you notice little things, and if you're a curious person, you'll go, I wonder who does that. Like, when you think about like when someone has to go out and repair the ice in the middle of the game with a water bottle, and you're like, someone's gonna have to actually fix that later, and it's like, who does that? You learn about ice techs and all this different stuff. There's so many different layers to these sorts of things, but I feel like it's probably a relatively, thankless job on the fan engagement side, the consumer side, because all they notice is, if the one time this past season with the Winnipeg Jets, there was like a panel that was like broken on one of the sides of the jumbotron or something, or pardon me, what is it called, the
Center
big
hung.
screen, the center hung. Yeah. And those are the sorts of things that people notice and everything like that, but there's so much that adds to their experience, and I'm curious to hear kind of what the game looks like for you and what sorts of commands you're giving and things you're doing and how you're running the team that gets the game experience for the fans to be at the point where it needs to go. So like you have all these camera people and stuff like that. Are you trying to choose what angles? Are you specifying, the timestamps of what parts of the game need to be shown immediately and all that sort of stuff? What does the actual game look like for you when kind of puck drops?
So that idea of directing traffic, as soon as doors are open, we are live. So I am making sure that we've already tested everything. Everybody knows what they're going to do at a really high level, but I am calling cameras. I think that's the best way to describe it, and calling video inputs. So thankfully, Winnipeg has a wonderful wealth of really great talent knowledge. If you looked at any of the Olympic coverage, most of the curling was done uh, by Winnipeggers. There were some folks on hockey. We have so many great camera operators, and we have that at True North as well. So it's up to a lot of them are anticipating what is next because they know the show. But I am making sure, ready camera one, okay, take one. Where's that replay coming from? It's coming from blue, okay, ready blue, roll blue. Okay, we're going to come out to one. Okay, ready one, go one. Like that's kind of what I'm doing constantly. So a promotion will happen. So at the beginning, so as I mentioned, we have a script. So we know kind of what happens pregame. We know what happens in our TV timeouts. We know what happens in the intermissions. So I'm breaking down each of those elements. Like it's very high level. It kind of says, okay, we're going to do fun in the sun. Well, for me, fun in the sun is a video. It's camera with a text overlay. It's back to video, back to camera, and then out of camera into something else. So in a typical timeout for a Jets game, we have 3 of those type of things. So I break that all down and then call them as they go, watching a giant multi-viewer. So I'm looking at all of my cameras, all of my inputs on a giant screen. It's basically a wall, a video wall. And so that's the promotion side. But when play is going on, okay, there's a scrum after a whistle. Typically we're borrowing a camera from TSN or TSN or whoever broadcast is, because we share cameras across all of the broadcasters. So I'm moving from TSN into our own cameras. So ready one I know is my ISO or my tight follow. He is probably going to be following whoever is right in there, and he's giving me like a head and shoulders shot. Camera 2 is our reverse of that. So he might have, depending on where on the boards, that might be where I'm going next. Camera 4 is my corner shot. So I know that Melissa in the corner, depending on where things are, I'm live cutting and live editing as it happens. So if the scrum happens in front of the net, it's different than if it happens in camera 4 corner. A goal is scored. Those type of things happen. Where am I going first? If the celeb is coming straight into camera 4 corner, we're gonna go to camera 4. Basically just editing on the fly. So it is so cool to work with a crew that is so good at what they do, because the camera operators make it really easy for me to, again, set it all up. And then my technical director is the one who's actually pressing the button. He's making it happen and putting it all where it needs to go. So it's all sequencing.
That's so cool.
Over and over.
It's so cool. Like, I feel like that'd be so fun. It's like you say, it's sequencing over and over, but like it happens, within the scope of every single game, which is always so different. And I'm sure you like, there's no like, okay, we've gotten 5 games under our belt, we don't have to think anymore. Like, you're just crazy, kind of going all the time. That's nuts. Okay, I have a question then. Like, when you're watching like a game on TSN, for example, and every now and then they'll cut to a camera, and then it seems like they've cut to the like, I don't know if wrong one is the right word, but sometimes it's like shaky on, and then they'll cut away from it to another one. Is that like the camera operator is probably supposed to be like zoomed in, like you said, like head and shoulders, for example, on this person, or like what happens there?
It depends. There's so many different situations. So sometimes it is just a technical director hit the wrong button. That happens. Sometimes the director calls the wrong camera. I do that all the time. I have a hard time sometimes with player numbers. So I'll see Neil Pionk and I'll say number 4, but he's on camera 2. So my always joke is, so we show all the players during warm up. So we'll go run through and we show through players, and we have these L bars that have their stats on them. So we kind of run through that every game. And I always joke that that's my warm up, because that's where I get that numbers out of my head. Because we're always going, okay, number 2, we're starting with Dylan DeMello on camera 1. So things like that can easily happen. Some shows have, 15, 20 cameras. And sometimes, especially on mobile broadcast, it's different directors calling different cameras in different numbers. So the sequencing might be different for them. So I always give like that idea of, I kind of feel bad when that happens, because I'm like, there's so many things that could happen. And nobody ever notices like how many sequences and how many decisions are made in a game. They only notice the ones that go wrong, not the ones that go right. So as an example, like every penalty, I try to do the exact same way, because it's very similar to broadcast. How do we tell that story? Okay, you've got a tight shot of the play of, usually the ref coming to the box. You want a tighter shot of the guy coming to the box as well, the person who did the infraction. Then you want to see the call on the ref. Then you want to see the replay. And then you want to see the moment of shame in the penalty box, and then go out. So I always like to keep those similar, because people are used to that, and that kind of tells the story. One thing to think about with game production as well is we don't have the context of play-by-play or color commentary. People are looking up at the screen because they've missed something, or their angle isn't quite right. So we're telling the story in a different way. People are looking to us for a reason. So when we're showing replays, a lot of times new replay operators are like, oh, this looks so cool. I'm like, but there's no context to why we're showing it. You have to be able to tell that bit of the story, because we don't have, Kevin Sawyer telling people what they're looking at or why they're looking at it. It's really, it's broadcast without context. So you'll notice that I don't cut my cameras a ton during play, because I want people to, if they're looking up at the screen during play, it's probably a visibility thing, or they're looking along, like they might be along the boards and they can't see where the puck is. I want to make sure that they're experienced, because that's really who we're there for. We're there to, our audience is the fans within the bowl. We want to make sure that they're looking up at the screen for the things that bring them value, as opposed to being super flashy with lots of big cuts. I like to be fast when it comes to fans and those type of things, because that brings energy. But during the play, a hockey fan is really looking, they're looking for the replay, for that penalty, for that save, for that thing that they may have missed. But it's a different audience than it is for broadcast, because broadcast is telling the story. They have the audio to be able to supplement that story.
That's so interesting. Yeah, you're totally right. And I think of that sometimes when I'm at games, and you see, I'm very fortunate that the commentary that I receive around me when I go to games is, journalists and people who I very much respect and appreciate their opinions, so they're often watching the game very closely and stuff. If you're sitting in the stands, not always the case and everything like that. So if you look away for a second, the whistle gets called and you think maybe it's a penalty or something, if you don't know what it is, like you have no context when you're sitting in the stands. So that makes a ton of sense. And I'm curious, this is actually a really interesting kind of pivot in conversation, because earlier on the season, we had Annie Chipman, who oversees game production as her as the VP of marketing of True North. It's one of the parts of her role, and she was talking about how, in our episode we talked about how Winnipeg is just a bit of a different market than some other places for a lot of different reasons, and one of the things that she was talking about kind of centered around game production, the whole concept of replays, where Winnipeg Jets fans, if someone ices the puck, they want to see the replay of that. So like, how close is it to being an icing? Whereas maybe in like a Vegas or a Dallas or something, that might not be what they're looking for. And is that something that, resonates with you as well? And you have had that experience with the fan base where that they want to see the hockey when there's something notable that happened in the hockey to show?
And also, I'm a fan first, right? So, and I did replay for many years. So I'm with Annie 100%, because like an offside is an offside. And we know how important that offside can be. So offsides for sure, something that we always try to show. We don't have necessarily the same number of angles sometimes, but yes, our fans are smart. That's part of the fun of being in Winnipeg is we can put on a really good show, but people want a really good hockey game. They want to be able to experience that game, and you don't have you're not watching it at home where you can rewind that same thing. So, and also some of my favorite things are I always joke when people start chanting "Ref, you suck." I'm like, oh, it's the song of our people. And when you show like any type of replay that kind of, with officials, we try to be nice, but sometimes they put themselves in their own situations. So we'll just show we're very home team advantage is the best way that I'll put it. I'm definitely going to show if there was a infraction on a Winnipeg Jet, might show a different angle than if we had done the exact same thing.
Oh yeah, that's the way to do it. I know sometimes I've definitely noticed that where it's like sometimes, and I'm sure this is one of the banes of your existence is when there's like a 3.5 minute stretch with no whistle, and then like two or three crazy things happen in that stretch, and when it's a quick bout, it's very easy to put the replay up there of the specific thing, but sometimes there are multiple specific things, and if one of them is like a really really nice play by one of the Jets players, well, that one's probably going to get some priority over if it's the opposing team making that nice play, I'm sure.
Yeah, and hockey is different. Like working football, football's made for replay because there's a start and stop to everything. So it's a different way of like football is a great way to learn replay because you know that you're always ready. You have a certain amount of time and then there's the next snap. With hockey, you might have, yeah, 3 minutes and you have four things that you need to show. And then there's a penalty and you can't show any of it because you don't have time. And then you're going into a TV timeout. So those are decisions that I'm kind of making on the fly as I'll ask folks to like, okay, park that because we want to see it maybe, but then if something else better comes along, and unfortunately, sometimes it's a penalty that'll wipe it out and we go into penalty and then go into our timeout and then not have time for some of that great stuff. But thankfully, we always do period highlights, so people will see it again. But yeah, those are really interesting points of like it's a hockey game, but then there's this show kind of around it. So we want to show hockey at its best. We want to be, I'm a Jets fan. I've been a Jets fan since I was a little kid. That's kind of how I, got into all of this, just that love of hockey. And going to different arenas. I've been fortunate to go to, I want to say about 10 now, to watch the Jets. And even while the Jets were away, I went to Montreal a ton because my pickup team while the Jets were gone was the Habs. And if you're going to go watch a hockey game, Montreal's a really great place for that experience because they tie in the history so nicely. They tie in the game production. And then they also have some really good corporate sponsorship stuff that now I pay more attention to than I probably would have back in the day.
Oh, totally. Yeah, the little things that you look for now that you have a better snapshot of what goes on under the hood. And I say better snapshot isn't like exactly how it works, but that's I feel like that's always the case with things. Or when you go get your oil change, if you have experience working with cars, you're like, hey man, what you doing, kind of thing. So that's awesome. And I'm curious on your side, I'm sure every market is a little bit different, and off the top of my head, I don't know how many markets have both their AHL and NHL teams that play in the same arena, and I'm curious, what is kind of the difference between working those two games? I know you have different roles with kind of the Jets and the Moose, but in terms of how it looks for the team, I'm sure with, you don't have the whole idea of national broadcast being factored into stuff. And I would even ask about that within the Jets, when you have a Prime versus Sportsnet versus TSN broadcast, how that differs for you. But then on the NHL versus AHL side as well, just probably less cameras and different things like that. How does, even within the sport of hockey, the replay stuff look a little bit different for the different stuff that you do?
So AHL, we are the broadcast of record. So our feed goes out to AHL TV, it goes out to the league, it goes out to everything. So we don't have that backup and we have a very small camera grouping for an AHL game. We only have four manned cameras. And then we have a bunch of point of views, but they don't really help you out versus when Sportsnet is in town, it's a little different. So typically for a Jets game, there's usually three trucks. So there'll be an away truck, a home truck, and then there's usually us. So we have three broadcasts going on with those two trucks, and we're all sharing inputs. We're all sharing cameras. When Prime comes in, they have two trucks just for themselves. So it's a little different, but they also run a different pregame show. Most home, our pregame shows are a little different now, depending on, what's going on. Playoffs, completely different game. So the farther you get in the playoffs, the fewer camera spots we have in-house. Last year and the season before, I lost my ISO camera. So that is my camera that does all of my main promotions. That does, like, it is my go-to for everything. And we had to move it into a slash position, which is in one of the corners. So you have this high corner as opposed to your nice center ice cam as your secondary camera, which makes everything just look a little different because you're shooting through netting, and it's not the same. So for the AHL, I love the AHL because it is a fantastic training ground for our crews. It's a really good, like, that idea of draft and develop is very true. You get opportunities to put in those reps, and then it's a little slower. The timeouts are a different time, and we usually only have like 2 corporate activations per timeout. We also have a very different crowd. So you get a chance to see, like, it's a lot more fan focused. So it has a different feel to it. And then once you get to the NHL side, it's fast and furious. Like, we have 3 corporate sponsors per timeout, sometimes more. If it's a fan appreciation or something, we're trying to jam in as much content as humanly possible while playoffs, another example where, the content is different, but how we actually have everything situated, we might have more, we might have less, depending on who that host broadcaster is. We're the third. That doesn't mean that we're the least important. We all share our things, but our audience is very different. It's the audience in the building, and they're paying to be there. So that's also something that's a little different as you look at like an NHL. When the Jets first came in, every game that you went to was an event. That first couple of seasons actually, it was every single game was an event. It doesn't feel quite that same way, but for an AHL game, for some of those kids playing Timbits, that's an event. Like, they get to go to the game with their buddies. They get to have popcorn. They get to go to the sign making station. They get to dance on the center hung. So you think of like those different audiences and what becomes an event. That's kind of, I would say, the biggest difference between crowd wise, AHL and NHL. So just the AHL is the great place to learn. It's a great place for that foundational stuff. And then the NHL, of course, becomes a little more corporate. And what we can do kind of depends on those corporate overlords, depending on who's there.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think that's I feel like I've heard similar things from other components of people who work within the AHL where it's like it's a good place to develop not just for the players but for those that support it as well. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, probably a little bit less perhaps at stake, and that's no offense to the AHL in any capacity, but then also, yeah, probably just less variables where things can go wrong or things can, all different kinds of things can happen, and that makes a ton of sense. I'm very curious how you kind of got into this or decided this is something that you wanted to do. I feel like it makes so much sense that this would be something that you could become good at and a skill you can hone and you can become really, passionate about it and stuff, but that initial point of entry I'm just so curious about. And I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of what your journey into this profession has been like.
So I was a very young CreComm student. I started at 18. Like, I graduated in June. I was in CreComm in September. And at that point, the program was a little different, but we had an opportunity after the Pan Am Games. That's how old I am, yes. After the Pan Am Games, they had installed these giant screens in the old Winnipeg Arena. And they brought in a group of CreComm students, myself included, to do game presentation because they'd never had this before for the Manitoba Moose. So this was the second season of the Moose, and it was very much our instructors were directing and switching, and then there's a group of students who had no idea what they were doing. We're doing camera and all of that. As a 19-year-old or 18-year-old kid in CreComm, it was so cool to be in the same rink that I, watched the Jets when I was a kid. So that's kind of what it hooked me right away, because I never wanted to be, I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I never wanted to be in front of the camera. I didn't love writing, but once I got into that background piece of like all of these logistics fit together and how they fit together and who does what when, and then seeing that all come together, I was hooked. It was amazing. And there's also, if you're going into the rink, there's something visceral about like the smell of the popcorn, the smell of the ice, all of those things, the sound of skates on ice. I remember that as a kid. I'm very fortunate my dad took us to games when my sister and I, when we were younger, even though neither of us played hockey growing up. I grew up on a dairy farm north of the city, an hour and a half. So my dad would take us after school. We'd go to the rink. It was, again, that visceral, like the popcorn, the smell, the sounds. then my dad would drive an hour and a half home. I'm just thinking of this as an adult, as a grown adult now, and then be up at 4:30 in the morning to milk cows. It seems so crazy to me. My dad had a love of hockey. I had a love of hockey, and having the opportunity, really young in my career to be like, okay, this game prez is really cool. One of the biggest things that I will always say to anybody who gets an opportunity to work in it is if somebody believes in you and somebody keeps on giving you those opportunities. I had somebody like that at the old arena and Winnipeg Enterprises. His name was Bill Coward. He brought me onto the Bombers crew the next year. So the Moose moved away from the CreComm kid crew, but I got to be a camera operator for Bombers. So I did that for years and years and years. Bill kept on scheduling me. I kept showing up and wanted to work whatever I could. So it was one of those situations where I found the right person at the right time. And when the then MTS Center opened up, Bill was the broadcast manager at MTS Center and was looking for some camera operators. And sure enough, I got a call, and the rest is history. Like since November 2005, I've been thankfully a part of the True North group, starting in camera, replay, working my way through the control room. So that was kind of my start. Was just, a CreComm kid who wanted to try whatever she could and had the opportunity because somebody just kept on scheduling me along the way. But it was so cool at that point to be like, as a child, that place where you used to watch, that team that, like, again, I'm a childhood Jets fan. And the Jets left when I was 15, 16. Those are pretty formative years. It was really cool to go back there a few years later and be able to experience that. So it hooked me right from the start.
That's so cool. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, well, first of all, 15, 16, if the Jets left when I was 15 or 16, I think I would have lost my marbles. I'd just gotten them back, and I was not about to give that up again. So I can only imagine. But I think that whole idea of, getting to be a part of something and then clinging on to parts that you perhaps weren't expecting to. Not that you thought that you would hate it or anything like that, but you didn't realize it would resonate with you in the same way that it did. And I feel like that Red River CreComm, the creative communications program that, you were a part of, Raquel Payne, who was on our first season of the show, she's also a grad of that program, and lots of folks that I know through the media space have gone through that program here in Winnipeg. And I think that's always been kind of the value sell of it when people talk about how positive their experience with it is the fact that you actually get to go to places, try things, get the hands-on experience for stuff, because it's really difficult to know what you like and what you're good at and how things make you feel until you actually get to try them. And so I think that that's a really cool idea. One thing for me that, you're talking about the different senses and whatnot of going to a hockey game. For me, there's always been something about an empty rink. I don't know what it is. Like I feel every time I walk into the Canada Life Center now and there's, one or two players on the ice, for morning skate, or only one or two, camera people or reporters or team staff are out there yet. And I just kind of taking it all in, how big the space is. And sometimes I think, I'm like, how many of my houses could you stack up in here, kind of thing? You think about those sorts of things, and the emptiness of a rink. There's something about it that's so cool to me, where it's like, what is this going to be like in 8 hours from now when everyone's here to watch this game? It's such a cool concept, and the way that it makes you feel, you can't really explain it other than the fact that that's how it makes you feel. And I'm so curious to kind of pivot this back to talk about, you tell the story of your dad taking you to these games, you and your sister, as a kid. And I think, the way we engage with sports as a kid often does kind of dictate the way we, experience them as we get older. But you and I have a similar background in terms of, we now do much more in hockey than we probably ever thought we might professionally, and didn't play it growing up. So tell me a little bit about how you got into the sport, having not played it. It's something that people ask me a lot, and I never have an answer, so hopefully you have a better one than I do, because I'm like, I don't know, it's on TV and I could skate. I don't really have an answer for you guys, sorry, but maybe you'll have a more interesting one than I do.
Well, it comes down to my dad. We always had hockey on. So again, the media landscape was very different back in the 80s, right? You had your Hockey Night in Canada. Not every Jets game was broadcast. So we watched like every Saturday night. Hockey Night in Canada was just, that's what we did. So that was one of those things that was always a bonding thing for me with my dad and my sister. And my dad, we always had an outdoor rink as well. So it was a different time in that there was no girls hockey in the town that I grew up in. So, and my parents were very busy. They were running a dairy farm and trying to raise two little hooligans. So together, we always had an outdoor rink. We always skated, but we never actually played organized hockey. But my dad was always, get those cheap tickets at Safeway or wherever. And the Jets, the older that we got, the more that we got engaged with hockey. For me, I was consuming as much as I could. So I would listen to CJOB, whatever I could listen to, I was listening to on the radio. Whatever I could watch on TV, I was watching on TV. And then I, started subscribing to Hockey News, Sports Illustrated, everything I could to just consume as much as I possibly could hockey-wise, which was really good from now that I think of it from a hockey history perspective. I was reading Ken Dryden's books at like age 11 or 12, like those type of things. So that hockey history thing was always, I had to consume as much as I could, even though I didn't, I played sponge hockey in my 20s. I was terrible. And the advice that my team gave me was run to the net and we will try to bank pucks off of you or you will get rebounds. And I'm like, I heard Adam Lowry once say, now that many years later, there's bags of money in the crease. He was right, except for me playing sponge hockey. I'm not particularly none of those things. So for me, consuming hockey was just huge. Like the idea of, again, I didn't know until those opportunities with CreComm, like all of the teams around it, the fact that you'd walk up, and I still remember this in the old arena, you had to go up an elevator and then up these crazy stairs. And then the best perch in the arena, there's actually a photo of it from the old audio booth where you were in the corner and you just saw, I can't imagine what it was like during, the true original whiteouts. I remember that perch really, really well. And the old arena really sticks with me from when the Jets came back and Kyle from True North called me and said, do you want to work for the Winnipeg Jets? I said, that would be a childhood dream come true. Like, I remember it clear as day. I'm sitting in my office at the U of M, trying not to cry, because it was like one of those things where you're like, yes, I still feel that way. They've been back for 15 years, and I still feel every day that I get to go to the rink and work for my childhood favorite team, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that, especially with the season that we've kind of gone through this year, my Winnipeg Sports Talk co-host and I, Connor, we bring this up every single time we were at a game, and maybe the Jets choke up a lead or whatever, and it's like, he's like, man, I have buddies who bought tickets cheap tonight, like they still spent like 60-70 bucks whatever to come watch Connor McDavid play, and every single day I get paid to be here. Like, how could we ever complain about anything ever? Like, it's just, it's such a crazy thing to think about, especially when you think of kind of where you started and where you go from now. But hockey history for sure is definitely one thing. And something I always say to people is, I think an underrated thing you can do if you want to get better at anything in hockey, if you want to become a journalist, if you want to work in any capacity, like, watch more of it. Just the more you can watch of it, because the questions you're going to start asking, the things you're going to start noticing, like, it just, there's nothing else, everything else pales in comparison to how you learn through just watching and then consuming content in and around it. But you still have to have some form of, I don't know if it's feedback loops or things that you're researching and whatnot. Like, I'm thinking of you in your role where we were talking before about the offsides or whatever. Sometimes a puck or a play or whatever is so significantly offside that no one even bats an eye. Everyone's like, yep, super fair enough, whatever. Other times it's super, super close, so you want to show it and kind of like spite the refs because the players are reacting, because they're like, how dare you call it offside? We were totally onside. Same thing with icings, where it's like every now and then, a puck will so obviously be an icing because a guy missed his pass and it is what it is. Other times, the, away team's defender is kind of lollygagging as they're skating back to the and then it gets called icing and everyone's mad. And like, those are little nuances of the game that I don't have an answer for how I learned them either. Like, I don't know. How did you get to know the sport to that depth?
I think just exposure. Like, we think of like the thousands, I don't know how many hours of hockey I've watched. And part of it was, so when the Jets first came back, our old control room used to be in the basement. It was standard definition. We didn't upgrade everything until 2015. We got a nice new center hung, and we all moved upstairs and got beautiful new equipment, which is still fantastic. Like, we have a really good setup now at True North. But I would work a Jets game, doing replay. I had my 4 angles, and I had to cut between cameras on a router. So I would have what I needed to into my record. If I missed that cut, I would miss that goal. I would miss that whatever while still trying to watch. But I would go home after that game and I would watch the TSN Jets version of it, and I would see what they did in those situations. So I would see what the broadcaster, I had that comparison 1-to-1. I still do that when I watch other directors cut anthems, when they cut special ceremonies, all of that stuff. I'm always watching to see what everybody else is doing because I want to, like, these folks have so much experience. They've worked all kinds of things. So for me, it's a lot of it is exposure and a lot of it is just like knowing the moments, and you don't know them until you get to them. And that's something that I try to tell like young replay operators or young camera folks. There's a lot of it is anticipation because you don't know it until you actually have to be that fast or make that decision. And then once you've made it a couple of times, the confidence comes in. So yeah, some of it is just exposure, to be really honest. And then be anticipating that something's going to happen. Not that every icing is the same, not that every offside is the same. If something looks close, I'll definitely want to like jog that back and take a look at it because it might actually be close. So getting that muscle memory of always being ready, especially as a replay operator, and you have to know that, okay, I'm always looking every single shot. Okay, was there a tip on that? Okay, all of those things. I'm always looking to see if there was a block, who had that? How many do they have? That's just something that I naturally am curious about. But a lot of it is just it's exposure from game after game after game. And then being able to compare was really important for me when I first started doing NHL replay because they have similar cameras. They have the exact same game. How does that match up?
Yeah, that's such a cool kind of, baseline to have for comparison when you're doing it, with curiosity, not to be like, what a terrible broadcast or I'm terrible at my job, kind of just out of pure curiosity. Because, sometimes you could watch another team's game, but they have all these very different resource constraints where it's like, it's kind of like apples to oranges kind of thing where you don't get to learn as much. But I feel like that would be such a cool, and I'm sure you could obviously still learn from those sorts of things, but that would be such a neat kind of what you're totally right that they're going to cut it in a slightly different way than, what you're showing. And you're like, oh, yes, because the broadcaster was talking about this player, the color commentator brought him up, so now they're going to show him. Why would I show him in that same instance? And little things like that makes a ton of sense. And I'm curious to hear, like, how many years into watching, loving, consuming all kinds of hockey. And I remember a specific story of this past season. The Ottawa Senators were in town for a random, like, Monday night prime game, I think, or something like that. And we're sitting, and something happens on the Ottawa Senators power play where one of the guys shoots the puck and it hits one of his own players. It hits Brady Tkachuk in front of the net and play moves on. And basically I started going down this rabbit hole of what kind of shot attempt is that? Because I was like, it's not a block will not be credited to the Winnipeg Jets because no Winnipeg Jet blocked that shot. It's not a shot on goal. It's not a shot missed because the puck was going. And so I started asking everyone around me about this, and they're like, that's a good point. I'm not sure. I texted some people. We started looking stuff up. Turns out it's a block shot. It's credited. The shooter is credited with having shot a block shot, but the team does not get a block shot on their stat sheet either. So then at the end of the game, the amount of shots the Sens took that were blocked did not equal the amount of shots the Winnipeg Jets blocked. So, the more you learn, you live and you learn every single day. Little things like that are part of the reason why I just love getting to do what I do, because you never know enough about what you're doing and stuff. And I'm curious to know if you have any stories of, firsts, of things that you encountered when you were, running into different game scenarios or different things that you hadn't seen before. And like you said, anticipation's the biggest thing. You go with your gut, you kind of adjust, and you make your choices, you do what you have to do, but then afterwards you're like, that was a really interesting instance, whether it's like, an injury that you had to kind of like work around or little things like that. Have there ever been any kind of moments where you're like, I've never had to do that before?
Well, the injuries are definitely one that I'm really cautious on because people want to see it. They want to see what happened, but you never want to glorify what happened or make it like we're very, very cautious on both sides, both Moose and Jets about that. Many years ago, Jacob Trouba went into the net or went into the backboards really hard, neck first, and his neck made an awful, like it was actually just like you kind of felt gross when you saw it. And then we were watching what TSN was showing, and they weren't showing the same thing either. So we're like, we're definitely not showing this. So there are situations, especially around injuries, I'm pretty cautious about. When it comes to first, like a lot of it comes down to kind of style. For example, like shootouts, I like to see what the shooter is seeing on the goalie. So I like to show a backside, like a handheld backside, because I want to see what the shooter is seeing on the goalie to see what opportunities are there. So that was something that I didn't really work out style wise until I had done a lot of it. But those are like the choices that you make, because I think it's really cool to see what the shooter sees in that situation. What the goalie sees doesn't help you out quite as much, but a lot of the, like sometimes if for context, having that high overhead robo shot is sometimes interesting. We worked those in. We When they first came into the league, people were using them a lot. I find them they're really good for context, but you find that some broadcasts overuse them. I feel they overuse them. Or it's a speed camera, so the camera that's on top of beside the penalty boxes. So some broadcasts use that a lot. Some in-house. I was at a Rangers game, let's say 2019. They used it a ton in their in-house, and I'm like, I don't understand why, but it's Madison Square Garden, so they must be doing it for a reason. So yeah, I when it comes to first, that's a tough one. I've worked a ton of events that had different feels. I think that's the other thing in this. A lot of what I do is vibes. So you're very analytical in stats. I'm more vibe based. So there's been a lot of really like amazing vibe-based situations that I've been able to work in. A couple of years ago, I don't know if you were there, but the Bison men's hockey team was playing the Ukraine
Yeah,
U25
that's right.
team.
Yeah, yeah.
That game was just tip to tail a good time. People were having fun no matter what was happening. They're singing, they're dancing. I don't like there's not many times, there's lots of times you leave the rink and you feel good. That one just felt like a feel good night. World Women's Tournament that we did, I want to say that was 2017. We that was a really interesting having a tournament. We used to back before the Jets came back. I think we did an World Under 17s as well. So those tournaments are kind of a slog because you're working three games a day and then getting to a gold medal situation. That's definitely a different feel than playoffs. Obviously, playoffs is a completely different animal because everybody's hyped already. And then sometimes an early goal or something will happen and that kind of sucks the life out of things. Or so I think that there are all these different experiences that you don't know. You don't know how to react to, say, yeah, an early goal in a playoff game when everybody's super excited, and then you got to go and do something else. Again, a lot of that is anticipation, but you don't know it until you're actually in it. And yeah, so trying to keep that vibe up is
Yeah,
sometimes.
oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I can only imagine that everyone was totally prepared when Cole Perfetti scored with 1.6 seconds left to tie Game 7, and that's like, that would have been a first for a lot of different reasons, but that
And
would have
that
been a
was one
crazy
game.
experience.
It's really funny because our producer Kyle is very positive no matter what. He is always positive when it comes to the outcome of the game. And that game there, I was like, there's still time, there's still time. And Nick Ehlers took that first shot, and I'm like, there's still time. And then we all saw what happened. And then I'm like, there's still time in my brain.
I can't
I
believe
was
that's where
not
your
letting
head
that
was
season
at.
go. I
I
was not
was
letting
like
that
in
season go.
relocation mode. I was like, it's over.
I was not letting that season go. And I had called Adam Lowry as well for the overtime winner on that one. I have a really fun video clip that somebody had taken of us in the control room when Adam Lowry scored because we don't have a lot of footage because we're busy working, but that was one of those situations where somebody was actually shooting what we were doing. There was a
It's
little bit of swearing, there was a lot of excitement. But I just had a moment where I said to the crew, I'm like, soak it in because there are so few times when you win a game 7 in overtime, you don't get those opportunities don't come. So I just like, I think I literally said, take a breath, soak it in because you're going between all of these things. It's really nice to have that 1 second to like enjoy it, high five, and then go back to work. So the complete opposite of the pandemic season. So we were still putting on a show, even though there was no fans. We were putting on a show
right.
for the players. So we still had to do things. So when we beat the Oilers, that playoff, we after what it was triple overtime,
Triple
we walked
overtime, yeah.
yeah, walked over the rink and there was nobody there. So
Oh
the
my
exact
gosh.
opposite, like you're there until 2:30 in the morning. Imagine what that would have been like with a crowd. So you have that, yeah, the Cole Perfetti and the Adam Lowry overtime like situations. And then that pandemic year was just so odd. And we had
So
had
that
that.
game 3 comeback would have been at home. Was that at home too? That, oh my gosh, and nobody was there for
Nobody came.
that.
No, and I believe that was the Bud Light Seltzy one. I
Yeah,
believe that's the Nick Ehlers meme one.
I think
There
so.
was like Bud Light Seltzy and us. Like we had a very small crew. We're all masked up. And we obviously, like, while the league was shut down, I didn't realize how much of this had become my personality, like how important it was for me to be, spending my winters there. As I said, like I schedule everything around Jets and Moose as soon as that schedule comes out. So the big thing was that it really shows you the difference of, not having NHL hockey, not having AHL hockey. And yeah, the experience is like the fact that I remember walking out there and being like, we just beat the Edmonton Oilers in a playoff round.
Vindication for the 80s, like all the way. And
Exactly.
no one's
And
there.
nobody's here. So it goes both ways, and it makes you appreciate things like that. That Adam Lowry, take that moment, enjoy it. So that's kind of my takeaway is like we get to be part of these really special things. Some of them are weird, some of them are wacky. But at the same time, like you get to be a part of something in a different way with a team of, really good friends and really amazing professionals that do it.
That's awesome. That's such a fantastic way to kind of end the episode, because I feel like with so many of these different, things, whether it's careers you choose to pursue, and at the end of the day, most people who end up working in sports in some capacity do so because they love it, right? Like, if you wanted to be an accountant, you could be at any big four firm, at any in-house, whatever you want. If you're an accountant for a hockey team, there's probably a little bit of interest in the hockey team kind of thing. And so it's always important, I think, to acknowledge that, how much we love the game and how that transpires and how that, transcends into what we do and how we engage with the sport. So it's so cool to kind of hear what your journey in hockey has been like and how it looks, and how we get to experience what your journey in hockey looks like every single time, for 41 games, if not more, a year for the Winnipeg Jets. So thank you so much for being here today, Janice. This was so cool to get to hear from you. This was so much fun. So I thank you so much for your time. And everyone, if you're listening, make sure you give this episode a like, the 5 stars, all that good stuff on your way out. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you.